at 42 million.
The art world, where paintings change hands for fortunes.
Sold. Thank you very much.
But for every known masterpiece, there may be another still waiting to be discovered.
This is it.
International art dealer Philip Mould and I have teamed up to hunt for lost works by great artists. We use old-fashioned detective work and state-of-the-art science to get to the truth.
Science can enable us to see beyond the human eye.
Oh, my goodness.
Every case is packed with surprise and intrigue.
Is it, or isn't it a Freud, then?
But not every painting is quite what it seems.
Gosh, why didn't I notice that before?
It's a journey that can end in joy.
There is enough to support the conclusion that it is by Tom Roberts.
Or bitter disappointment.
I don't think it's a work by Gauguin. I'm very sorry.
In this episode, can we prove this is a lost work by celebrated Victorian artist Sir Edwin Landseer?
I mean, what a phenomenal piece of painting that is.
Our investigation takes us to a tragic event in London's past.
It must have been just a desperate effort, though, a race against time to get these pictures out of the water.
Can science help us unravel the mystery?
Could it have been water damage?
It may well have been water damage.
Conflicting evidence raises tricky questions.
There is no way you would describe that as damage beyond repair.
Yes, and this is the living proof that a picture can come back to life.
Will we uncover a long-lost masterpiece?
This is a real revelation, actually. Hello.
Hi there. What have we got here?
Well, hopefully, something exciting.
We never know what might be in store when we investigate a mysterious work of art. Will it turn out to be a lost treasure, a deceptive copy, or a worthless fake?
Now that is a powerful picture.
It looks very interesting, doesn't it?
We've been sent this painting by Kathy Romerill from Ascot. She picked it up at a local auction over 30 years ago, but recently discovered it may be a long-lost masterpiece. We've invited Kathy to the gallery to find out more.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Fiona.
Hello, Kathy.
Hi, Philip.
Thank you so much for sending us this startling picture, which actually, let's face it, is also quite grim, isn't it?
Yes.
You're looking at effectively a snapshot of the horrors of war. It looks as though a mortar has just blasted the scene. There are 2 dead soldiers, a dead horse, a possibly wounded one, and it's enveloped in smoke and flame.
I mean, I have to say, it's heartbreaking, but it's so beautifully done as well.
Yes. The whole scene brings war really very, very close, and I find it quite emotional.
I mean, it's a really powerful and emotive scene, and also one that was particularly well known in the 19th century. This composition was painted by the best 19th century animal painter in Britain, Sir Edwin Landseer. One of the most celebrated artists of the Victorian age, Landseer was a household name in his day. Born in 1802, his skill at painting animals brought him fame and fortune. His majestic work, The Monarch of the Glen, is one of the most recognizable images of the 19th century. And Landseer's lion sculptures still sit proudly in Trafalgar Square. He was a favorite of Queen Victoria and painted the royal family and their many pets throughout his life. Landseer's extraordinary ability to capture the animal kingdom captivated the nation. Printed reproductions of his work increased his popularity, which is why I recognize the composition in Kathy's picture. This famous scene appeared in numerous prints hanging in Victorian homes across Britain.
So tell us the story of how you came by it, then.
Well, it was an auction at Chancellor's in Ascot in the Silver Ring, about 30-odd years ago.
And that's at the racecourse?
Yes, at the racecourse. And when I saw the grey horse, I just felt, although I've never ever got emotional looking at a painting before, but I thought, oh dear, dear, you know, I just stood feeling I was going to cry. It was like he was telling the story of the horrors of war. And I have a love of horses, and so inwardly I made a promise to the grey horse that he would come home with me no matter what.
I mean, I have to say, I've got a grey horse, actually, and seeing that, knowing how frightened horses can be and what it must have been like in war for them. Yeah, I absolutely get how you responded so emotionally to this painting. I can feel it, actually, as you're making me feel very much the same.
So I'm curious about the auction. How was it catalogued to begin with? Was there any reference to Landseer?
No, there was nothing about Landseer. It was just an unknown painting.
The auction catalogue from 1988 lists the painting as a 19th century oil seen after a battle with an estimate of £400 to £600. Determined to take the picture home with her, Cathy bid £720. It was only recently that Cathy's son spotted the scene in their picture had been famously painted by Landseer. The original work was called Time of War, but intriguingly, it is thought to be lost.
It was at the Tate Gallery in London in the 1920s, the early part of the century. The Thames had broken its banks and the Tate was flooded, and it was supposedly lost in the flood.
The Thames flood of 1928 was a tragic event. People lost their lives and thousands were left homeless. The lower galleries of the Tate were flooded and hundreds of national treasures were damaged or lost. Landseer's Time of War was one of them.
So how could it possibly end up here, then?
Well, someone could have helped rescue it, and who knows after that what happened.
So I suppose the big question is, have you bought a copy, which is quite possible, or could you have in fact stumbled upon the lost picture, the picture that was considered gone in the flood? In which case, well, it's got condition issues, clearly, which are going to hold it back, but I could see it making, I don't know, £80,000, possibly more. But just as important, you would have recovered a really significant work by a major British artist that was thought lost for getting on for a century.
I actually think it is. But, you know, that's just my opinion. It's so well painted. And, of course, I would love it to be a Landseer.
I'm keen to get the investigation underway by taking a closer look at the physical evidence, the painting itself. Pushing out through all of this mayhem are areas of real beauty. And I found myself sort of drawn like a moth into the smoky area of this grey horse's head on the left. I mean, what a phenomenal piece of painting that is. There's a sort of anatomical understanding going on. And look at the way the nose is done, the soft tissue. You know, you do feel that you could press it and it would give in the same way that the soft nose of a horse would. I mean, unquestionably, something has happened to this picture. It's been traumatized at some point in its life. And if you look into the flank of the central horse, which is, after all, the main part of the composition, you can't really read it. Your eye bounces off it. The paint is opaque. It's sort of milky in areas. Could it be that this is flood damage? And if so, that might take us closer to the possibility that this is one and the same picture that was in the Tate in the flood.
Cathy bought the picture all those years ago with her ex-husband, Barry. They're still good friends, and she'd like him to be part of the investigation. So we're calling him in the States.
Barry, very nice to see you. Thanks for joining us from Florida.
Nice to be with you.
And this is a bit of a fake or fortune first, because we are reuniting you and Cathy. You've been divorced for 30 years or so. And, of course, you're separated by the Atlantic as well. And you've come together to investigate this painting. So, I mean, we're now looking at it to see if it could be a work by Edwin Landseer. Was that something that had ever crossed your mind, that it could be by one of the greats of the Victorian era?
I have to say the answer is no. It had never crossed my mind. We both liked the painting, and that was it.
So if we do manage to find out the painting is by Landseer, what would that mean to you?
Well, it would mean, I think, to both of us, certainly to me, that we had great taste, you know, in the artwork. I'll be delighted.
Well, we'll certainly do our best. Speak to you again soon, Barry. Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thank you.
Bye.
I've come to Edinburgh on the trail of Landseer. I want to see how Cathy and Barry's picture compares to genuine works by the artist. So I'm heading to the Scottish National Gallery. It's home to a wonderfully rich art collection. Works by some of the greatest names in Western art are hanging here, including paintings by Landseer. And there is one which has become one of the most famous images of the 19th century. The Monarch of the Glen. The challenge with this painting is its celebrity. It's hard to get beyond the whiskey bottle labels, the biscuit tin tops, and try and understand what it is about this painting that so reaches you. And in so doing, I think we can get a greater sense of what's going on in Cathy and Barry's picture as well. Landseer is capable of capturing extreme characterization in his animals. I mean, as far as it's ever possible to say this about a wild animal, doesn't he just exude self-confidence? And look at those antlers and the way that they're profiled. It's like a crown. The location feels like a realm. But although perhaps this is slightly idealized, and people do say that about Landseer, it doesn't matter, because the anatomy is so powerful. Just look at the matted fur on the neck of the monarch. Although painted with broad brushes, he's absolutely captured its appearance. But it's the nose that, to me, marks this picture out. That wonderful, buttery description of soft cartilage. And that's exactly how I responded and how I felt when I saw the grey horse in Cathy and Barry's painting. Both these paintings have a capacity to reach you, to affect your emotions, by a combination of the artist's empathy with the animal and the most brilliant, incisive anatomical observation. Something very comparable is going on in both compositions.
Back in London, I'm trying to find out more about the past life of the lost Landseer. So I've come to the Royal Academy. The Academy holds important information about Landseer and his works. So I've asked archivist Mark Pomeroy to dig out anything that might shed light on his missing masterpiece, Time of War.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Fiona.
So what have we got here?
So what we have is a very early catalogue raisonné of all Edwin Landseer's works, published in 1874, just after his death.
Catalogue of the works of the late Sir Edwin Landseer, dedicated by special permission to Her Most Gracious Majesty the Queen, no less.
You need to turn about a third into 1846, and I think you might find something that'll interest you.
OK. 1846. Waiting for a load, at bay, a goodly freight, time of peace.
And you need to turn over for the rest.
Time of war.
They are a pair. They're companion pictures.
Oh, I see. So Time of War, the painting we're looking at, was painted along with another painting, Time of Peace. The pictures, which were exhibited at the Royal Academy in 1846, were presented to the nation by R. Vernon Esquire in 1847. So they were owned by whoever this R. Vernon is.
Indeed.
Right, so we've got an owner.
The exhibition catalogue from the 1846 summer exhibition lists both Landseer paintings.
Here's an image of Landseer's Time of Peace. It's a fantastically bucolic scene, isn't it, with the sheep and the goats and the white cliffs of Dover and the blue sky, so peaceful. And Time of War?
Time of War's on the next page.
So there it is. Gosh, what a contrast. There's an even smaller image above.
I'm almost certain that's from a souvenir leaflet, a gallery guide, essentially. But there are dimensions beneath the engraving there.
So these would be the dimensions of the original Landseer?
That's right.
The correct dimensions?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, hang on a minute then. So what have we got? 2 feet 10 inches by 4 feet 4 inches. So the painting that we're looking at, 34 by 52. So 2 feet by 10, 24 plus 10, 34. 4 feet 48 plus 4, 52. So that's bang on, 34 by 52. I mean, that's brilliant, isn't it?
It's very encouraging.
I mean, it's not definitive proof, but that is massively encouraging that the painting we're looking at is exactly the same dimensions as the original.
Back at the gallery, we're getting to grips with the evidence so far.
So, we know that Landseer painted 2 paintings, companion pieces, in 1846. These are engravings, Time of Peace and Time of War. And we know that both pictures hung in the Tate, and both are thought to have been lost in the Thames flood in 1928.
And tantalisingly, you've managed to establish that Cathy and Barry's picture is the same dimensions as the lost painting.
Which is really encouraging, but we also know that Landseer's Time of War was massively reproduced. It was everywhere, even a pot lid with Landseer's Time of War on it.
I think that's rather sweet.
Well, I think it's ghastly. But what it shows is this picture was out there for anyone to copy.
And Landseer's War was copied. Look at this. This came up a few years ago at auction as a copy. You can so easily tell it's a copy. The colours are quite lurid. It just doesn't work, really.
What about this one?
It just looks rather dead and insipid.
When you look at Cathy and Barry's, it's just in a different league.
It is. It's much more intense, more going on, more atmosphere, more detail.
Where we've got a problem is the provenance. We know that Cathy and Barry bought their painting from Chancellor's auctioneers. Chancellor's auctioneers ceased trading in the 1990s, and there are no surviving records at all. And when it comes to the back of the picture, there's nothing on it, not a single label.
So we've got a picture without a paper trail.
It looks that way. What we can do is go back to Catalogue Raisonné for 1874. And what that shows us is Time of War presented to the nation by R. Vernon, Esquire. So he obviously owned the painting. So who was he? I think what we're going to have to do is, rather than work back from Cathy and Barry, we're going to have to work forward in time from R. Vernon, Esquire.
And if we could prove that Cathy Barry's picture was one and the same as that, well, that would be job done, wouldn't it?
Our hunt for the owner of Landseer's lost masterpiece, Time of War, has led us to Horse Guards.
It's a pretty beautiful entrance, isn't it?
Gorgeous.
The stables here are home to the Queen's official bodyguard, the Household Cavalry. We've discovered that Landseer's lost painting and the man who owned it have close connections to these soldiers, and also to a defining moment in British history. Peter Storer, curator of the Household Cavalry Museum and a former Royal Horse Guard himself, is going to tell us more.
Hello, Fiona.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Good to see you. So, Cathy, the reason I brought you here is that our investigations into the past life of the lost Landseer has brought us to this man. This is Robert Vernon, and he is the first person to have owned what you hope is your painting, Landseer's War. Fine-looking gentleman, isn't he?
Yes, very much so.
Now, the reason he's the first person to have owned it is because he commissioned it from Landseer in 1846. And he has a direct connection to these horses. He amassed a huge fortune by supplying horses to the British Army for the Napoleonic Wars. Peter, you're a former member of the Royal Horse Guard yourself, and he would have supplied, what, thousands of horses?
Tens of thousands. Tens of thousands. I mean, certainly on the battlefield at Waterloo in 1815, there was something like 60,000 horses on the battlefield on that one day.
60,000?
So we're talking thousands.
Well, let's look at the painting and try and decipher what we can see here. So, Peter, you're the man to help us do that.
The soldier on the right is a trooper in the Royal Horse Guards known as the Blues. The uniform he's wearing there is virtually identical to the uniform our colleague here on the right on the black horse. If you look on the picture, you can clearly see his cuirasses. the breastplate. You can clearly see the cross belt, the white cross belt, and the red flash cord, the white gauntlets, and the helmet, the Albert pattern helmet down there with the red plume, is identical to the helmet that's worn today.
It can't be very comfortable.
It certainly doesn't look it. What about the soldier under the grey?
He's a trumpeter, and he's the direct equivalent of our colleague here on the left. You can't really see much of the uniform, but you can see his trumpet with the trumpet banner. And he would be riding the grey horse because he was the commanding officer's means of communication on the battlefield. And when the CO gave an order, charge, walk, trot, turn left, turn right, he would have blown the relevant call on his trumpet, and the rest of the regiment would have reacted to that call.
20,000 horses and nearly 50,000 men died at Waterloo. Landseer's bloody battle scene clearly held great meaning for the man who commissioned it. And it was a message Robert Vernon wished to share, because in 1847 he gifted the painting, along with his entire art collection, to the nation.
So we have here a record from the National Gallery of his paintings. And it says here, on the 22nd of December, 1847, a collection of 157 pictures was presented by deed of gift to the trustees by Mr. Robert Vernon. And that art collection had some of the greats of British art in there. So if you look at the names, we've got Sir Joshua Reynolds, Gainsborough, Rumney, Constable, and then all the way down at number 414 is the painting you hope is yours.
Oh, fantastic.
Landseer's War, just below peace.
Yes. He amassed all that and gave it to the British people. It's fantastic.
And not only that, if your picture is the original Landseer, it hung in some of the finest and most prestigious galleries in the land. So in 1850, it hung in Marlborough House, a former royal residence.
Yes.
It then went on to hang in what was known at the time as Kensington Museum, now known as the Victoria and Albert Museum,
Yes.
of course. From there, the National Gallery in Trafalgar Square.
Yes.
And finally, ending up at the Tate at Millbank, where it went in 1900. And we know it hung there until 1928 and the flood. So the question is, what happened to it after that?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it, Fiona?
Which at the moment, I can't answer.
The trail of Landseer's time of war now leads us to the night of January the 7th, 1928, when London suffered one of the worst disasters in its history.
The combination of melting snow, heavy rainfall, a spring tide, and a storm surge out of the North Sea caused a massive torrent of water to gush down the Thames. It must have been like a tidal wave, and you can see the damage that was caused. It crashed through the embankment wall. Look at the wreckage here, smashing the wall to pieces, destroying the road, and of course rushing into the buildings on either side. And it was the working class families that lived alongside the river that suffered the most. Look at this family here, standing surveying the wreckage of their home, but at least they survived. And this is terrifying. Lowering this tiny child down into the outstretched arms of the man perching precariously on what looks like a door. Others were not so lucky. There's a heartbreaking newspaper report from the time. Amazing floods in London, it says, a heavy death toll. Several persons trapped in basements. So 14 people were unable to escape and they drowned, and 4,000 were left homeless.
With the embankment wall destroyed, there was nothing to stop the torrent of water flooding the lower galleries of the Tate. Staff spent 12 hours trying to rescue hundreds of masterpieces from the National Collection.
You can see these two men wading through what must have been freezing water, and I think they're coming out of that door just behind me there. Look at these guys, all four of them. More, 5 of them, lugging this huge painting. It must have been just a desperate effort, though, a race against time to get these pictures out of the water. And here they are, propped up against the wall. I mean, just here, where I'm standing, the finest of Britain's collection of art, just stuck up against a wall. We know that
Landseer's original time of war was in the basement gallery here at the Tate. So what kind of state was it in when one of these men finally managed to rescue it?
So are there any signs of flood damage on Cathy and Barry's picture? To find out, we need to examine the work forensically, so I've sent it to the Courtauld Institute. Professor Aviva Bernstock is one of the world's leading authorities in the scientific study of art. Her research could provide crucial evidence to prove whether this picture is a long-lost work by Landseer or an imposter by another hand. Hello, Aviva.
Oh, hello.
So, what are your first thoughts on this?
Well, I think it's a very nicely painted picture, very skillfully done. Particularly the horses' heads, they're really fantastic.
So what about the condition of the picture?
Well, that's one of the problems, and there are some obvious condition issues which make the composition quite hard to see, actually, in passages. So the painting has had some damage, and it's been lined onto a new piece of canvas using a wax resin adhesive, and you can see that oozing out around the sides here.
Yeah. Okay, so the actual canvas has been cut off the stretcher and put onto a new canvas.
Yeah, it was a method that was used from the 1920s onwards to prevent moisture ingress into paintings or to slow it down.
Could it have been done in response to water damage?
It may well have been water damage. I mean, you can see there are other signs that the painting's been affected by changes in moisture conditions.
Can I use a torch just to have a close look? So,
yeah. Can you see that the paint is cupping up?
I can.
So at some point there were moisture fluctuations or changes in environmental conditions to which the painting was exposed, and that's what caused the cupping.
And could all of that have been caused by a flood?
Difficult to say if it was caused by a flood, but certainly there's evidence that it was exposed to moisture at some time.
I need to find out what happened to the paintings that were caught in the Tate flood. A total of 226 oils were submerged, and in the immediate aftermath, damage assessments were made. I've got some copies of documents here from the Tate archive, and they all relate to pictures that were caught up in the flood of 1928. The first one is just a hastily written report, but intriguingly, it's like a kind of triage system of damage to these paintings, a bit like you would people going into a hospital. So category A is the least serious, slight damage or none. And Landseer's War is not in there. Category B, rather damaged but easily repaired. And our painting is not there. Category C, this is damage beyond repair. And down this list, you've got Landseer Peace and Landseer War. So Landseer's War is recorded as damage beyond repair. But what became of it in the months after the flood? This is a final revised list, September 1928. Ruined by flood. That's not a great word, is it? Ruined. And there is Landseer's War. So step forward in time to 1935, and I've got a report from the Tate. It says the director was authorised to destroy the remains of certain pictures which had been damaged beyond repair in the flood of 1928. To destroy them. But then what it doesn't say is which pictures were they? Was Landseer's War among them? It's just so odd. If it was destroyed, how was it destroyed? When was it destroyed? Surely there would be a record of that. I find it very strange that there wouldn't be. So what happened to Landseer's War?
Back at the Courtauld Institute, Aviva is continuing her technical study of Cathy and Barry's picture. She's using imaging techniques to show what the eye can't see. Infrared and X-ray photography can penetrate through the layers of darkened varnish and paint to reveal hidden clues. This should enable us to detect any further signs of damage, possibly flood damage.
So this is the infrared image, which shows you what's beneath the darkened varnish. And what you see underneath are those dark spots all over the horse's back, which are old restoration paints, presumably applied to cover up damages to the paint.
Yeah. It's interesting also that you can see a little bit more of the saddle and the boot. The infrared is revealing a little bit that the eye couldn't see.
We're now going a layer deeper with the X-ray image.
Crikey. Look at the energy in that picture that you couldn't really see with the naked eye, that hurricane of strokes in the background.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very energetic use of lead white containing paint around the horse's head to shape it into exactly the right shape.
And doing it in this sort of rather dangerous, explorative way is not surely the way a copyist, someone who's replicating another work, is going to do it.
Yes, it would be very difficult to mimic the style that's so freely painted.
So what can you tell us about the condition from this?
On the lower right-hand corner, you can see there's quite a lot of thick, dense, white-looking areas, which look uncharacteristic of the rest of the painting, and I think they have been put on to disguise some kind of damage underneath.
But there's definite evidence that something has happened to this picture and that repair has been required.
That's what it looks like, yes.
Across London, I'm heading to the National Gallery. I've been trying to find out what happened to Landseer's time of war after the flood of 1928. It was among 18 paintings listed as damaged beyond repair. But I recognize one work among these pictures, The Execution of Lady Jane Grey. It's a painting by Paul de la Roche. And as you can see, it's far from ruined. Curator Chris Riopel has agreed to tell me about the resurrection of this monumental work.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you.
Hello, Fiona. Welcome.
And standing before this sumptuous painting, how is it that, according to several lists in the Tate, it was either damaged beyond repair, completely spoiled, or even destroyed? So what's it doing here?
Well, this great flood of 1928, all of a sudden they were faced with an overwhelming crisis. What to save first? The most important things were the works by Turner. And I think that the decision was made that all the effort had to go into rescuing the Turners from the water, and less important things would be put aside. And when things get put aside, they get forgotten.
So this was just forgotten about then, was it?
It was forgotten about from 1928 to 1973, when a young researcher went in to the Tate Conservation Studios, saw a number of rolled up pieces of canvas, and just asked, could we unroll that? 2 pictures were in it, one by the great English painter John Martin, and with it rolled up this picture.
So this was just rolled up, sort of tucked away somewhere for 40-odd years?
Yes. Yes, and repeatedly reported as no longer existing. And in fact, its condition, we have the photograph from it, its condition is not all that bad at all. There are tears here and there, but very far from destroyed.
Very far from destroyed. I mean, looking at that, there is no way you would describe that as completely spoiled, damaged beyond repair. So why on earth did they say that at the time? I find that absolutely gobsmacking.
Yes, perhaps one of the reasons is that Paul de la Roche, the artist, in the 1830s, was one of the most famous painters in the world. By 1900, he was almost utterly forgotten. And so there must have been no great energy to put effort into saving this picture at that moment. And in fact, in one of the lists, they say that the works destroyed were of no aesthetic interest whatsoever.
And so a painting like this was considered of no aesthetic value whatsoever?
Aesthetically, they didn't see the importance of it, so they seem just to have rolled it up with other pictures and turned their attentions elsewhere.
All this is making me wonder then if the Landseer we're looking at, which was also described as damaged in the flood, in fact, like this painting, wasn't that badly damaged, but was kind of tucked away and just forgotten about because no one valued it. Aesthetically, they didn't really rate it.
This may very well be the case, that Landseer's popularity had diminished as well, and decisions had to be made, and it was pushed aside.
And so maybe, what, passed it on?
Yes. Yes.
Sold
to a
it,
student,
I don't know.
maybe you can learn something from this.
And therefore, the painting that we are investigating could be one and the same painting that was listed as being damaged in the floods.
Stranger things have happened. And this is the living proof that a picture can come back to life.
It seems extraordinary, doesn't it, that a painting like Lady Jane Grey would just be rolled up and forgotten about it. You can't imagine that happening today. But, you know, the Tate back then wasn't the powerhouse in the art world that it is now, and they just didn't have the means or the resources to conserve all the paintings damaged in the flood, and inevitably, some fell by the wayside, even a painting like Lady Jane Grey.
Back in Edinburgh, Aviva has come to the Scottish National Gallery on an evidence-gathering mission. To determine whether Cathy and Barry's picture is the work of Landseer or a copy by another hand, we need to compare the pigments with known works by the artist. The gallery has agreed to let Aviva study Landseer's The Monarch of the Glen.
It's really a massive treat to be here in the gallery, having the painting taken down, especially for us to look at. It's fantastic.
Landseer's most famous masterpiece has been valued at £8 million. A team of specialist art handlers ensure it's safely off the wall.
Of course, they have to be really careful because the paintings are very heavy and, you know, one slip could be a disaster.
Aviva can now get to work to discover what this masterpiece is made of.
What I'm using today is an X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, and it's a technique of non-invasively, so it doesn't damage the painting at all, looking at the elements in the pigments, and from that we can identify the pigments with luck and compare them to the painting that we're investigating.
This data will allow Aviva to go back in time to the very ingredients he used to make this masterpiece.
Back in London, I've come to the Tate Gallery. I keep finding that works recorded as destroyed in the flood have since turned up. John Martin's The Destruction of Pompeii was rediscovered in the 70s, badly damaged, but not destroyed. Thanks to the painstaking work of Tate conservators, it's now been extensively restored. I'm hoping conservation manager Jane McCree can help me make sense of these conflicting records.
What's so intriguing about this painting is not only its magnificence, obviously, but in this Tate catalogue from the 1950s, it is described as a work destroyed and omitted from the catalogue. We now know that just wasn't true. It was actually forgotten about.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that could be the case with ours. I mean, how can that happen?
First of all, there wasn't a conservation department here at Tate in the 20s. It didn't come into existence until the 50s. In the 70s, the department grew, and I think there was then the opportunity to re-look at these paintings that were listed, as you say, omitted from the collection.
Records from the Tate suggest that some pictures recorded as destroyed in the flood had been written off too hastily.
In this list here, there's a note written in 1970, found only slightly damaged and re-entered into the collection. And here we have the damage and the restored painting.
Yeah, and I think different eyes at different points in history make different decisions, I guess, but with a modern take, that to me is repairable.
So all this makes me wonder, of course, is if the original Landseer wall wasn't damaged beyond repair, and it wasn't destroyed, in fact. Have you got any records of it at all?
We don't have a conservation record for war. We do, however, have a record from Peace, which is its companion painting.
So that's this document here?
Yes.
Nothing can be done. There is no painting except the original canvas support, 2 exclamation marks, destroyed in flood of 1928.
And if you look at another Landseer painting that was damaged in the flood, The Maid and the Magpie, which visualises that damage, you can see very clearly that nothing remains but the canvas and a few fragments of paint.
That is slightly horrifying, I must say.
And we have an archival book that was found in the Conservation Archive.
And this was written when?
The catalogue's from 1937 to 38.
So we've got Peace, finished in flood, then we've got War, destroyed in flood, and then it says finished in flood.
It feels quite finite, indicating perhaps nothing remains of them.
I mean, surely there has to be a chance, doesn't there? Given you've got no record of it, but we know that works that were listed as destroyed were not destroyed. There has to be some kind of chance, doesn't there, that it still exists somewhere?
Personally, I don't think so, and I don't think the evidence points in that way from our Tate archive. It's unlikely, I think.
We need a body, though, Jane. That's the thing. You know, I mean, without an actual body, it's hard to let go of this completely. Back at the gallery, the plot thickens. I understand why the Tate feels that it's very unlikely that Landseer's time of war survived the flood. I mean, that word finished is pretty damning, isn't it? But I've been looking closely at the conservation records, and look what I found. There's a listing here of a painting by Lance George called Fruit Piece. See that word there? Finished. But look at this, found in the 1970s. This is Fruit Piece. Now you can see the damage up here, but finished? Because look at it now, fully restored and back in the Tate collection. It's so frustrating. I know these records are from a long time ago, but paintings that were described as finished weren't finished. Some paintings that were described as destroyed haven't been destroyed. I just really want some physical evidence as to what happened to Landseer's time of war. And without that, I haven't got a body. And so there's just a little part of me that thinks maybe it did survive after all.
Back at the Courtauld Institute, Aviva is trying to identify what Kathy and Barry's picture is painted with. Tiny samples taken from areas of damage can reveal the paint layers and the pigments present. Aviva is also using X-ray fluorescence to analyse other areas of the picture. But will the paints be correct for the period and in keeping with Landseer's palette?
Hi, Aviva.
Hi.
So, would I be right in thinking this is a particularly busy, complex time for ingredients of paint?
Yeah, absolutely. In the 19th century, it was the development of inorganic chemistry, and as a consequence, there are a whole lot of new pigments which were being invented all the time.
We certainly don't want to find anything that was invented post-1846 when we know that the original painting, A Time of War, was done.
Absolutely.
Let's see if the blues are right or wrong for the date.
This is a part of the blue painted banner, which you can see actually on the screen here, is made using a mixture of Prussian blue, which was invented in 1700 but used shortly after, and some cobalt blue that was first made in the early part of the 19th century.
So far, so good. Nothing that was invented post-1846.
What about the white in the horse's head?
This is painted using lead white, which has been used for thousands of years by artists for painting. It's highly toxic and you can't buy it now. It wouldn't pass health and safety standards.
Will the reds of the soldiers' uniforms sound alarm bells?
This is painted using a mixture of vermilion, which is mixed with iron oxide. Both pigments have been used for a very long time.
All time-honoured, all around in 1846.
Absolutely.
And finally, the greens of the leaves.
What you can see here is the greens painted with a mixture of chrome green and some emerald green. They're all early 19th century pigments.
This is real progress, isn't it? There are no red flags. There is nothing in this painting that was not around when Landseer painted the original in 1846.
No, that's right. They're all absolutely right for the period.
Armed with data on the pigments in the Monarch of the Glen and cross-sections from other genuine Landseers, Aviva can now make a comparison with our picture.
This is a cross-section taken from a brown area of paint, and on the right is from a genuine Landseer in the Tate, and you can see the cross-section below, which has a really similar layer structure. So you have the first layer, which is chalk and lead white, and then a more opaque layer, in both cases, of lead white to give that white priming that the artist painted on. And then on top, you've got a couple of paint layers which contain very closely similar types of pigments. So they're quite closely similar in materials and technique.
Well, I find that rather encouraging. So just to be clear, everything that you have shown us is what we would expect to find in an original work by Landseer.
Well, that might be true, but you have to bear in mind that at this time, other artists working may have used the same combination of pigments.
No, that's just you being the typically cautious scientist, but I still can't help feeling this is progress.
Back at the gallery, new evidence has come to light. We've discovered something in the Tate archives that could be a game changer.
Now, I know I said I wanted to find a body. Ta-da! I have found one. Now, this is admittedly before the flood of 1928, but this is a photograph of Landseer's original time of war.
But I mean, that's a properly early photograph. Must be 1880s, 1890s.
And what do you think when you compare it to Cathy and Barry's picture?
I mean, that's really interesting to see, because at first glance they look extraordinarily close. But there are details that don't quite match.
Like the smoke, you mean? I'd noticed that.
Yes, but the smoke might be explainable because there had been damage in that area.
And what about when you go in closer, like this area, for example?
You see, I find that more worrying because, I mean, just look at the difference in detail. Look at the handle of the sword in the photograph, that lovely sort of row of highlights. They're just not there in Cathy and Barry's.
And then, what about here, the horse's mane?
Yeah.
Areas of concern here as well, aren't there?
You see more detail in the photograph. There's more modelling, more highlight.
I mean, these are subtle differences we're talking about. Does it mean that Cathy and Barry's picture is not one and the same with this photograph?
Not necessarily. I mean, photography was very different in those days. There was a lot of different processes, manipulations that could possibly explain some of the things that we're looking at here.
The photograph has raised some concerns, so I need to understand how the image was produced. During the late 19th century, printed reproductions of artworks began to be replaced by photography. Hampstengel was an art publishing house that pioneered this. In 1894, they began a 2-year project to photograph works in the National Gallery, including Time of War. I've sent the image to photography historian Anthony Hamber so he can lend his expert eye.
Now, I've been looking at this photograph because, of course, the thing I'm absolutely hoping is that our painting is going to be one and the same. But the more I look, the more I'm encountering things that worry me. So how could those differences be explained?
Well, there were still major issues around capturing all the colours and all the brightness and darknesses in a painting.
By comparing a modern image of this work by van der Weyden to a 19th century photograph, it's clear to see the limitations of early art photography.
If we look at the detail on that standing figure,
on the coat,
on the coat, and we go back to the amount of detail,
it's gone.
It's gone. So retouching of the negative was very common practice. And here we have a photograph of a retoucher at work.
So this is airbrushing in the 19th century?
It is. The retoucher is actually scratching off using a scalpel off the negative. She could use a paintbrush and put on chemicals or paints on it. She could use pencils on it.
So looking at this photograph, it's not necessarily as reliable as we might imagine.
Well, yes, the differences are partly because of the level of retouching and also the state of the painting that is in not the same condition it was photographed.
Retouching of the photographic negative, along with damage and overpaint on our painting, might explain some of the subtle differences. But can Anthony see through these issues to find similarities?
The piece of metalwork, I'm not quite sure what it is on the left-hand side.
It's a blown-up frame of a window.
The horse's head, the white horse's head, and the bridle on that. And also, I think, the heads of the two figures, if they're not too overpainted.
Anthony has also noticed a particular anomaly on the canvas edge.
If we look down the left-hand side, we can see that there is a kink towards the bottom. And below that kink, the canvas is slightly wider than the rest of the painting on that side.
I can see exactly what you're pointing out.
Does Cathy and Barry's picture also have a kink on its edge?
Well, I never. It's definitely broader here. There is no doubt about it. Now, that's fascinating.
Is this evidence that could link our picture to the photograph?
Bringing to bear your experience of photography of this period, do you think that this could be one and the same as the photograph of the lost painting?
I do, for several reasons. You have the kink, and then you have the fine detail in other areas. And I do not believe a forger, a copyist, would go to that level of detail or would even be technically capable of replicating it.
Well, that's a very exciting observation.
Before we submit Kathy and Barry's picture to the Landseer Authority, I want to give it the best chance. I worry that its condition might hold it back, so I've sent it to conservator Rebecca Gregg for cleaning and restoration. The picture is covered with surface dirt and darkened varnish, with areas of crude overpaint. We can't begin to get a sense of the true quality unless we take these layers away.
These are always the most tense but also exciting moments in the process of trying to reveal a lost piece of art. Now, the question is, can Rebecca remove those later layers of varnish and dirt and paint in order to reveal beneath something of sufficient quality and also of condition to make this a work by Sir Edwin Landseer?
The solvent is beginning to bite now. You're now able to see through the discoloured varnish, the yellow, rather overcast layer in the background. It's almost as if sun is shining through the clouds. Some of the discoloration and varnish is now coming off the forelock, the little quiff on the top of the horse. Before, that whole area was solid, but now you can see a little chink of light coming through, exactly as you can in the photograph. I think that overpaint now is beginning to be removed. It's not just varnish. I can see hair and mane flowing and relating to the background a little bit more clearly. You can begin to see and feel passages that before were just invisible. With the layer of varnish and overpaint removed from half the picture, we can see the process is producing some striking results. Once the restoration is finished, the painting will be submitted to the Landseer Authority.
The day has come to find out if Kathy and Barry's picture is a genuine work by Sir Edwin Landseer. There are quite a few things that are looking really rather good for Kathy and Barry's picture now. We've managed to establish that it is exactly the same dimensions as the original Landseer Time of War, thought to have been destroyed in the flood. And also other paintings that were thought to have been destroyed in 1928 in that great flood have turned up decades later. So it's possible that Landseer's Time of War wasn't destroyed either. The only thing is, we have no provenance to link Kathy and Barry's picture back to the original Landseer. Literally none. And that is undoubtedly a problem.
This picture does have a lot going for it. The X-ray has shown a sort of explorative process beneath the surface. Not surely the way a copyist, someone who's replicating another work, is going to do it. And there are no rogue pigments there to suggest a later hand. A leading photography historian says that in his view it's one and the same picture as the original that was photographed in the 1890s. The cleaning has been a mixed blessing, and there's definite quality there. But there are some areas also which are not as good as I would hope. Now, it may be that these are just condition issues. But my concern is that that might hamper our chances.
Kathy's come to the gallery to discover whether her painting has been accepted as a genuine work by Sir Edwin Landseer. Barry joins us from Florida.
So, behind this sheet is your picture. It is now cleaned and it has been restored. Here it is.
Wow, my goodness.
Wow.
It's beautiful. come up so well.
Now that the layers of varnish, dirt and overpaint have been removed, the painting is both brighter and clearer.
You can see things you couldn't before.
Oh, heavens, yes.
I mean, I think altogether it's been a very successful clean. I think an area that I would have liked to have improved more is around about the saddle. It may well be as a result of damage, but it hasn't quite transformed as much as I would like. Having said that, there are other areas of the picture which are now all the more appealing.
Absolutely the case, yes.
Landseer authority Richard Ormond has examined the picture and our dossier of evidence. We're about to find out his decision.
So I've got here the verdict of your painting in this envelope. I mean, there's a lot to play for with this picture, isn't there?
So if this were just a mere copy of a work by Landseer, it would be worth £2,000, £3,000, possibly £4,000 as a decorative picture. But as a Landseer, we would be talking £80,000, possibly more. But I have to say, if you could prove this were by Landseer, you would be giving the nation back one of the great treasures. This was a highly popular image, and it disappeared.
Well,
here we go.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Ready as I'll ever be.
You're sounding nervous now.
I'm a bit shaky.
Having reviewed the evidence, I have come to the conclusion that the painting Time of War is not by Sir Edwin Landseer. I'm really sorry. Oh, it's gutting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Does it give any indication of why or...?
Well, it goes on to say, the picture lacks the artist's spirited brushwork. It is summarily painted in the details, and it presents a flat, rather bland surface. That's a bit harsh. Nevertheless, it is of better quality than the average Landseer copy.
I'm glad you said that, because I've always maintained that this is a work of notable quality.
Richard Ormond writes that there's not enough flood damage on the picture, and though the pigments are compatible with genuine Landseers, they're not unique to the artist. In his opinion, differences between the photograph and the painting can't be explained by the print processes of the time.
Oh, it's so disappointing. But certainly Richard Ormond, and he is the man when it comes to Landseer, he's absolutely categorical it's not.
I am a little disappointed. One can't argue if he is a Landseer man.
You know, obviously there's an element of disappointment. There has to be crass to say there isn't.
To me, when I bought it, I didn't know what it was. I just knew it was well done, and I liked it.
And do you still like it, having been through this process and now
Yes,
finding
I
out
love
it's
it.
not a Landseer?
Now that it's been cleaned, it's even better.
Well, I'm so sorry we couldn't deliver you the magic name, and you can now keep on enjoying your painting.
Yes.
In your own home.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
There's still a little part of me that wonders, where is Landseer's Time of War? But anyway, we know now that it is not Cathy and Barry's painting.
But I think they need to hang on to the fact that even if it's not by Landseer, it is a work of quality. And there are aspects of it that are almost as good as Landseer himself. And if I were them, I would be proud to have it on my wall.
If you think you have an undiscovered masterpiece or precious object, contact us at bbc.co.uk/fakeorfortune.